Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I've got a really fun brand new die set from Art Impressions. This is the Frankenstein die set, and you get all the little pieces you need to create this little Frankenstein. The jacket, pants, some hair, the face, those little bolts even for the side of the neck, the hands and the feet. And what I decided to do was use some colored cardstock to die cut my pieces. You could certainly use the packaging as your guide if you prefer. I'm switching it up a little bit. And again, you could color some white cardstock if you prefer. So you could die cut these all from white cardstock and then color them in with your Copic markers or your Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens, whatever you feel best doing. So this little jacket, each side of the jacket has a little lapel. There's a score line there, so I'm going to fold back on that score line and just press that out with the bone folder. And then I used kind of a violet color, and then I used a lighter lavender color for the lapels. So I'm just going to follow that score line and cut those little lapels off that lighter color, and then we'll just attach them to the jackets. I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue everything down. Let's go ahead and do that other side. Now there are several puppets sets in the series. Oh, let's go ahead and add some black soot around the edges of all of these pieces. This is just going to give it a spookier look. There is currently a Santa puppet set which we're going to be using in today's video. And I know you're probably wondering why, but I will show you that shortly. And then we've got the Easter Bunny puppet set and a little snowman puppet, and they are all so adorable, really fun and easy to create. So with that little mini foam applicator tool, again, I'm just applying that black soot ink all the way around the edges. And that just gives a little shadow to each of my pieces, and again gives them kind of a creepier look. I even did it on the bottom part of each of the little bolts. So now with the shirt piece, this is the shirt, the orange piece, and I'm going to lay the jacket right over top on one side, and then I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. So just a little bead of glue, and you can attach these together. I did decide to glue down those little lapels. You could certainly leave them more three-dimensional and popped up if you wanted to, but I did want that lighter lavender color to show a little better, so I did glue those down. Now this is the hair, and I'm just trying to figure out exactly where that should be. I'm dropping it down a little bit, and then here are the pants, so I'll put a little bead of glue at the top of the pants. And for the bolts, I love these. These are so cool. You could put these, you know, a little bit lower down on the neck or higher up. I'm going to put mine higher. And again, I've got that black soot kind of at the bottom of each of those bolts. We're going to be adding a little silver to these later on as well. You could certainly use like a silver metallic paper here or a silver glitter paper. That would also be really nice. Let's add the hands. And then the little feet, the little boots. Now we will be laying this guy on a black border. I maybe should have done the boots in like a dark brown or something to have a little bit of contrast. So you may want to think about that when you're putting yours together. Now for the scar, I just glued that towards the upper left-hand side, but you could die cut a few different scars if you wanted to. And then let's add a little bit of glue at the top of each of those lapels and glue down the head. So here's where I decided to use the Santa puppet die set. I wanted to use his eyebrows and his eyes. So I grabbed those pieces and I'm going to die cut them from some black 100-pound cardstock. I thought they were nice and bushy. I was almost going to push them together kind of like a unibrow, but I didn't think he'd be quite as cute. So, but you could do that. So I'm going to add 2 of those little ovals for his eyes, and then we will draw in the nose and mouth. And you certainly have some good examples on the packaging if you want to do that instead. And you could draw these in. I find it a little difficult to draw in the eyebrows and the eyes, so I'm just going to use these. I just thought it was an easy way to add these. And if you're collecting the little puppet sets, you probably already have the little Santa anyway. So let's go ahead and add those pieces. And then with my black Pitt Artist pen, this is the 0.5 millimeter, just going to draw a little arch for the nose and then a little squiggly line for the mouth. Again, you could use the packaging to draw that mouth that you see on the packaging. And I'll just go over it a couple times just to darken that up a little bit. And then here's where I grabbed that silver Signo Gel Pen and I added a little bit of silver highlighting to those bolts. And then with my white gel pen, I'm going to add some little highlights to the eyebrows, the centers of the eyes, which does add a lot when you add that to the center of the eyes. And then I've got a black gel pen and I'm going to just draw a little plaid on his pants. And I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be a little bit wonky because again, this is supposed to be kind of spooky. So I'm just kind of randomly drawing those lines on. I'm not trying to get them even or anything like that. So once I have that plaid done, I'm going to add a little bit of stitching to each of the lapels. Just a couple little dashed lines. And then across the top of the shirt. Just to finish that off. And then I'll do the same thing along the cuffs on the jacket. Now going back to that white gel pen, I'm going to add some highlights here and there. Now once that was done, I'm going to my Seedless Preserves Tim Holtz Distress Oxide ink, and with a little small blending brush, I'm picking up some of that ink. I'm getting rid of most of it onto my paper towel. And then I'm just going to apply a little bit of that color to the cheeks. Again, this just gives a cuter look. You don't have to do this if you think it's too cutesy. You could skip that part. And then I did decide to grab this spider. And this is from the Spooktacular Halloween set. That's brand new this year too. And I did do a video using those stamps and dies, which you could check out. And I'm going to use tea rose on the cheeks and a little bit of the gray to do the body of the spider, and I'll use my Zig blender pen to blend those out. Now do keep in mind that all the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. So I did add that little bit of tea rose to the cheeks on my spider, and then I've got some post-it tape and I'm going to tape down the coordinating dies. So let's run that through the Spellbinders Scout die cutting machine. And now I'm going to go to the nested rectangle dies from Art Impressions. I'm grabbing that second largest one. Let's go ahead and grab some gray 100-pound cardstock and run that through the die cutting machine. And if you put it on a little bit of an angle, it is easier to run that through your machine. With the Spiderweb background stencil set from Fawn, I'm going to grab this one, the one that's kind of on an angle, and there are a couple spiders there that you could also stencil onto your project as well. The Villainous Potion Distress Oxide ink and a large blending brush, I'm going to go ahead and start in that upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to start with the darkest color first. The second color will be the Wilted Violet, and we're going to blend that into that darker color. So you do want to kind of overlap those two colors. You're going to get a really pretty look in the end. And it will go kind of darkest to lightest down towards the bottom. The last color is the Seedless Preserves. And let's take another blending brush and blend that in. Now what's going to be pretty is that gray will be the web. So the cardstock in the gray makes it easy because the webs will already be gray. You could do them in a light blue as well, like a haze blue or something if you wanted to choose that color cardstock. I just thought these colors blended really nice on this gray. So once I've blended that out, let's go ahead and remove that stencil and look at how pretty this is. But we do need to add a little bit to this So I'm going to take the black Soot Distress Oxide ink and a little bit smaller blending brush so that I can go all the way around the edges of this. And that'll just frame everything nicely, again adding a little bit more of that spooky look. And then with kind of the leftover ink on that brush, I'm going to just go around the entire panel. And I just want a random look. I don't want it to be perfect, so just some light and dark areas, and you can see that there. With the Distress Spritz in the Seedless preserves, which will coordinate really well with the ink that we used, you want to make sure you shake up that spritz really well so that you get that mixture, that pearlized mixture. And I'm going to just dip the nozzle right into the liquid and spatter it onto my panel. And you can see you get that really pretty shimmer. For the second color, I decided to add a second color of the Distress Spritz, and this is the Hickory Smoke. That'll just bring in a little more of that gray tone. So let's go ahead and let those dry. Now going back to the nested rectangle dies, I'm going to grab that largest one, and I've got some black glitter cardstock. And I'm going to die cut that, and then I attach those two together. Going back to that second largest rectangle, let's go ahead and cut some borders. So I've got some black 100-pound cardstock. I'm going to run that through the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and then I'll cut this down to about 1 1/4 inches. So I've got 2 pieces, and so I can tear 2 borders. And I like to tear going in 2 different directions so you get that really pretty ruffled edge. So I want one to be a little bit taller than the other one, so I'll tear this one down a little bit more. And then we can go ahead and glue this taller one onto this panel. And then for that shorter one, we're going to pop it up because I want a little place to be able to tuck in the Frankenstein. So let's go ahead and grab some small foam squares, and we'll add those just around the sides and the bottom because again, I want to tuck his little feet into this border. Once we have those placed down, we can use the Cricut weeding tool to remove the backing. It's just a little pokey tool that I can push right into those backings and pull them off really easily. We'll line that one up and tape it down. And then going back to that Spooktacular set, I'm going to grab that sentiment that says, "You're spooktacular." And to die cut that, I'll use the Portfolio template die set. And that has tons of dies in it. I know I've showed it to you a million times, but I'm going to grab this little oval that has that stitch border on it. And let's go ahead and stamp that onto some white Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. And I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink to do my stamping. And then we can go ahead and die cut this. So I'll just line that up and tape it down with some Post-it tape. And we'll run that through the die cutting machine. Now I did want to add a little sparkle to this, and I thought the lime green would be perfect. So I've got the Versamark watermark ink pad. So this is an embossable ink. And I've got a foam applicator that I use just for that ink. So what I've done is picked up some of that ink onto the foam applicator and just kind of brushed it around the edges of this oval. Once that's done, I can dip this sentiment right into the embossing powder, or you can sprinkle it on if you prefer. And then any excess that you have on there, just take a brush, a small brush, and brush that away. Any extra embossing powder, this is the Ranger Lime Tinsel, and it's just so beautiful. So any excess you can go ahead and put back in your container. And do keep in mind when you are heat setting your glittery embossing powders, that glitter is made of plastic. So you don't want to overheat it. If you overheat it, you're going to melt the plastic, and that glittery effect will get very subdued. It may even go away. So you do want to be careful. You want to get your heat tool nice and hot and then go ahead and heat set that. Now I didn't think I had enough glitter on there, so I went back to that Versamark watermark ink pad, added some more ink around the edges, applied some more embossing powder, and heat set that again. So we are going to make this fun little treat bag today, or gift bag. I grabbed a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock from the Fawn Watercolor Wishes Rainbow Collection Pack. And I'm grabbing this combination of lavenders. And we're going to also use the We Are Makers bag punch board. And you probably all have this. I've had this for so many years. I love using it. I pull it out every once in a while when I want to do a fun project. And what I'm going to do is go by the guide on the punch board, which told me exactly what size piece of cardstock I need. So to make this large bag, I need a 12-inch piece of paper, and then I'm going to cut it down to 9 inches, so 12 by 9. You do want to select the section that is going to be the bottom versus the top of your bag when you do this. So I want that darker lavender to be the bottom of the bag. So that line there I'm pointing to, that's where we're going to start. So let's line up the paper. We'll start off by punching once, and you want to make sure you slide that all the way into your punch board. And then we're going to draw a score line, and we're going to create the front of the bag. So let's go to the large bag and draw a score line. And then we're going to take that score line and line it up with that little notch that I'm pointing to right there. And now we're going to do the side of the bag. This will have like a gusseted side, so let's first punch, and then we're going to score. We're going to do the side, so you see that little arrow says side, and then we're going to do that triangle, and then from the center of the triangle all the way out. And that's going to create that little gusset for our bag. So now with that top score line, let's slide that down to that little notch, and let's create the back of the bag. So again, we're creating that large bag, so let's draw our score line for the bottom of the bag, and then let's go to that L for the large bag, and we'll score that. Let's punch this, and then we'll slide that top score line down to that little notch again. So let's line that notch up with that score line, and now we'll create the other side of the bag. So we're going to punch again, we're going to score the bottom of the bag, do the triangle, and then from that little notch all the way out. And the next thing we want to do is draw in that side score line. So you see that little arrow and it says side, we're going to score that. And the last thing we want to do is take that top score line, slide it up to that little notch again, and punch. So you can see what that looks like once you've done all of your punching and scoring. And I'm just going to trim this end one off on a little bit of an angle. It just makes it easier to put this little bag together. So let's fold on all the score lines. That little tab we're going to fold in, and then the side of the bag, the front of the bag, the other side of the bag, and then we've got the back of the bag. So we've got those score lines. And then for these little gussets, I'm going to fold the opposite way. So I'm going to push it in and just fold those together. Just make a little crease down the side. And I'm using my bone folder to press these out. And then you have that little gusset on the bottom. So you just want to kind of manipulate that a little bit with your fingers and just kind of get that to fold in. Once your bag is complete, that'll fold in nicely, so don't worry about that. And then I'm going to push that second side in, and then again just kind of manipulate that little triangle down at the bottom. So once you have that done, we can go ahead and assemble our bag. So we've got that tab along the side. Let's go ahead and add some 1/4 inch double-sided tape. I'm going to add a couple strips just to make sure this holds together nicely. You could certainly use a 1/2 inch strip of double-sided tape if you have it. And then for these two smaller tabs, I'm going to add some tape on the bottom of each of those. And then I'm going to flip this over and add one strip of tape on that largest tab. So now we can go ahead and assemble this. So let's remove that double-sided tape along this longer tab, and I'm just using my Cricut weeding tool to remove that backing. And the easiest way to do this is just to fold it in on itself. Just fold those two sides in and line that up. And then for the bottom, we're going to remove the tape from these two smaller tabs. And those will get pushed inside. And I'm just folding those in just to get everything scored a little bit. And then we're going to take the tape off of that other tab. So let's fold in that one side and then remove the tape from this other side and press that in place. And you do want to reach inside there and just make sure everything is taped down securely. You could grab your bone folder and slide it in there as well. So now for the top, I decided I wanted to fold that top over. You could certainly use some decorative dies to die cut that top, or your decorative scissors if you prefer, and you can have it not be as tall if you wanted to, so you decide there. But I'm just going to score this. I'm lining it up on that start line that we used earlier, and then I'm using that little notch on the triangle to score that. So it's probably about 1 inch score from the top of the bag. And then I decided to grab my 1/4 inch hole punch, and I'm just going to punch these holes on both sides, and it will punch through that little gusset as well. So this will be nice and secure when we tie it shut. So I'm just lining up the edge of the punch with that score line, and then to punch these so they line up perfectly, I'm going to close that flap over and use a pencil and just draw some little pencil marks in there and go ahead and punch those out as well. Now you can see that'll close up nicely. And I grabbed some lime green twine and I wrapped it around a few times, and then I just tied a pretty little bow. And then let's go back to Frankenstein. I've got some large 3D foam squares. I'm going to place those all around the back and a little bit of glue on his feet. Let's go ahead and remove the backing. And then, like I said earlier, we're going to tuck him right down into that little border. And then with that spooktacular sentiment, we're going to just glue that flat on the card. You could certainly pop this up as well if you wanted to. And I love how that glitter looks on there, that embossing glitter. And then I'm just going to cut a small piece of the 3D foam square for the back of my spider, and I'll pop him up right at the top of the sentiment. Now you can see that by selecting that large bag size, this fits perfectly on the front of my bag. And that's exactly what I wanted. So I put some tape on the back of this and I taped it in place. And you've got this beautiful ombre paper bag or treat bag. And let's take a closer look at it with the black glitter paper and that pretty lime green embossing powder and this most adorable little Frankenstein. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.